This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Baruch Haba, welcome everyone. This is my last opportunity to join you over this Yom Tov. So I want to thank Rabbi Sushard and the Gateways family for inviting me here for the first year, and thank you for all the all the attendees and listeners. I appreciate your participation. And Be'ezus Hashem, L'shana haba v'Yerushalayim. So we're coming in on Shvi Shel Pesach, seventh day of Pesach, which commemorates the higher level miracle of Kriyas Yamsuf that we discussed this morning. We discussed this morning from the Chassam Sofer how the Jewish people were transitioned from the Am Hashem, the Tzva of Hashem, the army of Hashem, to Banim Atem Lashem Lekeichem, to what we mentioned, Umalchuscha Ra'u Banecha Boikei Ayam Lefnei Moshe. But let's discuss miracles in general, how they work, and how we relate to them depending on when they occurred in our history. So let's begin with the Gemara in Chulin on Daf Zayin Amud Aleph. The Gemara tells us about a man by the name of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, who is commonly considered the son-in-law of Rashbi, Rav Shimon bar Yochai. That is the opinion of the Bavli. But if you look in the Malei Haroyim on the Gemara, the Malei Haroyim points out that the Zohar feels that Rav Pinchas ben Yair was the father-in-law of Rav Shimon bar Yochai. Be it as it may, the Gemara says as follows: Rav Pinchas ben Yair had a ka'azal opinion shvuyin. Rav Pinchas ben Yair was going to perform the mitzvah of redeeming captives. Rav Pinchas ben Yair was an expert in this particular mitzvah. In fact, it's actually written in the Sefer Tanya that any time a person performs the mitzvah of pidyon shvuyim, they are cloaked with the soul of Rav Pinchas ben Yair. Pagabe beginoi nahara, he encounters the river Ginoi. Amar lei. So Rav Pinchas ben Yair begins a conversation with the river. He says, Ginoi, chaloik li meimecha, please split, ve'ever b'cha, and I'm going to cross. Amar lei. So the river talks back to Rav Pinchas, look, if you could talk to a river, then the river could talk back to you. Ata hoylech lasos v'tzoyin koinech, v'ani hoylech lasos v'tzoyin koini. I'm doing my job, you're doing your job. My job is to flow. Your job is to do pinyon shuyin. But here's the thing. Let's make a calculation. Ata safek oisa, safek iata oisa. By you, it's 50-50. Maybe you'll be successful. Maybe you won't be successful. Ani vaday oisa. If I flow, I'll definitely be successful. So I'm definitely doing what I need to do. You may not be doing what you need to do. Therefore, the Gemara calls this ein safek moitzi midei vaday. I'm not splitting for you. Get lost. So Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair takes this very seriously. He says, if you don't split, I'm going to dry you up forever. If you don't split, that's the end of you. He says, okay, chalak le. The river took him seriously, and the river split. So Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair wins round one. Okay? Ding, ding, ding. Round one goes to Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. Round two. So there's a guy carrying wheat for matzah, for the current Pesach, for the Yom Tov of Pesach, excuse me. Pinchas ben Yair says, do me a favor, split for this guy as well. He's involved in doing a mitzvah. So he split for him. Fine. Now, this time, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair doesn't have to get involved in a conversation at all. The river splits immediately. Fine. Havahu Taya. There was an Arab merchant, Delava Bahadayu, that was accompanying Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair and the guy who was carrying wheat for Pesach. Amar le chaloik le nami lahai. Do me a favor, split for this guy as well. Otherwise, what are they going to say? They're going to say that we don't treat our accompaniments properly. We don't respect them. That we take them along for the ride, and then when they get to the river, they got to figure out how they're going to cross. Finally, the river splits for the Arab merchant. So the river split 3 times. It split for Pinchas ben Yair, it split for the guy carrying the wheat, and it split for the Arab merchant. Amar Rav Yosef, Kama Nofish, Gavra Mi Moshe, Vashitin Ribavan. This man, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, is greater than Moses and 600,000 Jews. Hasam chad zimna v'achat tlasa zimnin. Moshe Rabbeinu was only able to perform the miracle 1 time. And Pinchas ben Yair was able to perform it 3 times. So Reb Pinchas ben Yair, look how great he is. He's greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. Let's dramatize the question. Look how much easier it was for Reb Pinchas ben Yair than it was for Moshe Rabbeinu. We all know the Jews came to the Yam Suf, and what did the Yam Suf do? Nothing. It stood there. And they didn't know what to do. So Chazal say, Nachshon ben Aminadav jumped in al Kiddush Hashem, and what did the Yam Suf do? Nothing. And he jumped up to his knee, and the Yam Suf didn't split, and he jumped up to his neck, and the Yam Suf didn't split, and it went up to his nose until finally he cries out, Hoshieni ki bo mayim ad nofesh, and what did the Yam Suf do? Nothing. Chazal say that not until Moshe Rabbeinu showed the Yam Suf Aroinoi shel Yosef HaTzadik. And then there's a Medrash Pliya that the Yam Suf had to see Brisa de Rabbi Yishmael. So this is quite a stubborn Yam Suf. You have Moshe Rabbeinu, Adoin HaNeviim, with 600,000 Jews, maybe 2 to 3 million Jews standing there, and Moshe Rabbeinu is having a very difficult time until a tzaddik Yisod Olam jumps in up to his nose and cries out, Hoshieni ki bo mayim ad nofesh, and Reb Pinchas ben Yair goes to the river, split, otherwise you're dead meat. Okay, I'll split. And split for the guy baking matzahs. Fine. And split for the Arab. What's going on over here? What Moshe Rabbeinu had such a difficult time performing for a Pinchas ben Yair, it was a piece of cake. What Moshe Rabbeinu had a hard time doing, Reb Pinchas ben Yair did 3 times. And he didn't need 600,000 Jews, and he didn't need the coffin of Yosef, and he didn't need a Brisa of Rabbi Yishmael. I mean, wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu much far superior to Reb Pinchas ben Yair? Wasn't a Navi. Even if he wasn't Adoin HaNeviim, like Kambi Yisrael K'Moshe. So how do we understand this? Our Chaim HaKadosh says that the Yam Suf actually said to Moshe Rabbeinu, get lost. I'm older than you. I was created on day 3. You weren't created until day 6. What's the back and forth? So let me tell you the answer that the Or Chaim HaKadosh gives. And it's elaborated on by Rav Shach. And it's a very important yesod in understanding miracles in the Torah in general. In the Tanakh vis-a-vis Talmud Bavli. We find by Moshe Rabbeinu that before the Torah was given, the pasuk says, "U'Moshe Allah el Holakim." Moshe Rabbeinu went up to God. He went up to Har Sinai. Once he came down with the Torah, all of a sudden Hashem has a change of heart. Now it's no longer Moshe Allah Holakim. Now it's V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'soicham. Listen to the difference. Before the Torah was given, God says, I live up in heaven. If you need anything, you're going to have to come upstairs and get it. Once the Torah was given, Hashem says, you're where it's at. I'm going to come down to you and live in your home. Look at the contrast. Look at the difference. Why is there this difference that before the Torah was given, we have to, so to speak, go upstairs, and after the Torah was given, God comes downstairs? And the answer is very simple. Kan koidem shenitna haTorah, kan la'achar shenitna haTorah. Before the Torah was given, there's a world, it's programmed a certain way, and it's going to keep to the system. It's going to be very difficult to override the system. God created a world, Bereshis bara Elokim, He created nature, and nature will ride its course, and if you want to override the system, it's going to be a very difficult ordeal. But once the Torah is given, it seems that the Torah is the architectural plans of creation. Estakel ba'iraiso bara alma. Once Torah was given to us, the reins, the controls, the keys to the universe were then handed down to mankind. And now if the Ribbon Shalom needs if we need something, the Ribbon Shalom comes down to us. Here is where it's at. Where? By the Loimdei Torah. Says Or Chaim HaKadosh. When Moshe Rabbeinu comes to the Yam Suf, Moshe Rabbeinu has a nearly impossible task. God created the world. The way the world operates is rivers flow. They don't stop, they don't split. I don't care who you are. You could be Moshe Rabbeinu with 600,000 Jews and Aroina Shel Yosef and Brisa Rabbi Yishmael. The river was going to say to Moshe, are you kidding me? What do you expect me to do? I'm not going to split. This is my tafka. This is my job. How do you plan on overriding the system? God created me, and this is just the way it's going to be. So Moshe Rabbeinu needs the koyach of the Mesiras Nefesh of Nachshon ben Aminadav, and he has to jump in, and he has to cry out, and they need Brayser Rav Shimon, Aroina Shel Yosef. What the Yam Suf was telling Moshe is, I'm older than you. What was the river saying? What was the Yam Suf telling Moshe? Moshe, you were created on day 6. I was created on day 3. I'm older than you, meaning the Torah wasn't given yet. The Torah is older than both of us. The Torah was given 974 generations before the world was created. It's Davar Tziva Elaf Dar. If you were a Ben Torah, if you had access to the power of Torah, you could use the reins of the world, the control system of the world, to split me. But the Torah wasn't given yet. Therefore, I do my thing, and you're going to have a tough time overriding the system. But in the times of Pinchas ben Yair, the Torah was given. Pinchas ben Yair was a master of the Torah. He knew the revealed Torah. He knew the secret Torah. He had the keys of the universe. For him, it's really not a big deal to turn the key and split the river. It's not that Pinchas ben Yair was greater than Moshe. He was not greater than Moshe in any way at all. Moshe was a greater Navi. Rabbi Yehuda writes, the same way Moshe excelled in prophecy, he likewise excelled in every imaginable trait in the world, in every midah, in every madrega. The only thing is, what Pinchas ben Yair had access to was something Moshe did not have access to. Pinchas ben Yair had access to the Torah, which was now the Higisa B'Yom V'Layla, which was accessible to mankind, and if mankind masters it, along with it goes the control over the world. For example, the famous Nefesh HaChaim writes, now I have an interesting proposition. So you want to give your wife a compliment, so you tell her, dear, honey, you know what you are to me? You're like a horse. How's that going to go over? Not a good idea. Interestingly, in Shir HaShiurim, the love song between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael, you know what the Rivan Shem tells Klal Yisrael? Lesusasi b'rechvei faroi. We're going to lane it tomorrow, next day, Shabbos. Di misich rayasi. Like the horses in Paro's chariot, I liken you, my beloved. So God tells the Jewish people, you're so beloved to me. You're like a bunch of horses. Don't try that at home. What's the meaning? What is God telling the Jewish people? Says the Nefesh HaChaim that the Rivan Shalom is saying, you're not just regular horses. You're like the horses in Paro's chariot. If you would watch Paro riding on his horses, you would think that Paro controls the horse. But that's not what happened. The horses ran headlong into the Yam Suf. Paro may have looked like he was in control, but he had no control. Paro was merely riding the horse, but the horse was running and had a mind of its own. That is how the universe works. It looks like God is in control. You hear this? It looks like Hashem runs the world, says the Nefesh HaChaim. But Hashem doesn't. What? What does that mean, Hashem doesn't? No. We run the world. Hashem is roichiv shamayim be'ezracha. He's riding the heavens. But we're like the horse that is pulling the rider. It looks like God is in control. But the truth is, either it's tenu oizei like or it's tzor yilad chateshi. Either we empower God, or we weaken Him. Depending on our dedication and devotion to Torah and mitzvahs, that is how the world will be controlled. It looks like God controls the world. Do you know who really controls the world? The Jewish people control the world. Says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh words that if he didn't say it, who could say such a thing? He quotes a medrash on the pasuk in Yeshaya Mem Gimel. V'ata koi omar Hashem boiracha Yaakov. Listen to how he reads the pasuk. And now, so says Hashem, your creator, comma, Yaakov. The way you read the pasuk literally is, so says the creator, comma, to who? To Yaakov. Says the Medrash, no, read it differently. So says Hashem, comma, you know who the creator is? Yaakov. You know who, so to speak, the divine is? Yaakov. You know who runs the world, creates the world, guides the world? Klal Yisrael. It looks like God arbitrarily. It looks like, why are bad things happening? Why are good things happening? We don't know the ways of Hashem, and we're not entitled always to explain why things are happening. But there is no question, we are responsible for everything that transpires in the universe. That is the principle that once the Torah is given, the reins of the world, the reins of the universe, are handed over to the Jewish people. We are like the horses in Paro's chariot. Lesusasi berichve Paroi, dimisi chrayasi. Let's go to a Ramban in Parshas Chayei Sarah with this idea. We could answer a very difficult Ramban, a question, and many Achronim answer the Ramban's question this way. In Parshas Chayei Sarah, so the camels of Abraham come home, and they unmuzzle the camels. And Rashi wants to know, why are they unmuzzling the camels? Says Rashi, of course they're unmuzzling the camels, because until now, they were worried lest the camels graze in other people's property. But now that they're home, they could let the camels muzzle off, and the camels could eat in the property of the owner. To which the Ramban says, that's ludicrous. You're telling me that the camels of Avraham Avinu, if they would have been unmuzzled, they would have eaten other people's produce? How is that possible? Wasn't there a great camel owner and donkey owner by the name of Reb Pinchas ben Yair? You know, Reb Pinchas ben Yair had a special donkey. The Gemara says in Shabbos on Kuf Yud Beis Amud Beis, Amar Rab Zera, Amar Rava Bar Bizna, Im Rishonim b'nei Malachim, Anu b'nei Anashim. If the early authorities were men, then we're angels, then we are men. If they are men, then we're donkeys. But not a regular donkey, not a Pashita donkey, and not the donkey of Reb Pinchas ben Yair. And the Gemara says the donkey of Reb Pinchas ben Yair was careful only to eat the best hashgacha. The donkey would go into a restaurant, and the donkey would say, what's going on? Who's hashgacha? It's Rabbanut, Mahadrin, Badatz? And the store owner would say, the donkey would say, why is the date from last month? You haven't updated the hashgacha lately. He couldn't pull one over this donkey. The donkey was makbid, the highest level of kashrus. So frek the Ramban, if the donkey of Pinchas ben Yair was so zahir that you could put something with a low degree of kashrus and the donkey wouldn't look at it, then why would the donkeys of Abraham, why would the camels of Abraham need to be muzzled? The camels of Abraham would never steal anything. They were definitely firmer. They had to be on a higher madrega than the donkey of Chanina ben Doisa and Reb Pinchas ben Yair. I mean, if we would have a who's who of donkeys, you know, like a top 10 all-time Hall of Fame donkey list, don't tell me you know people who would be on the list, but besides that, you would have the donkey of Pinchas ben Yair. You would have to think the camels of Avraham Avinu would be much higher up on the list. And therefore, based on this, Ramban rejects Rashi. But Achronim say that there's a simple answer to the question. Avada and Avada, the camels of Avraham Avinu were on a higher madrega than the donkey of Pinchas ben Yair. There's only one difference. Avraham Avinu was before the Torah was given. Before the Torah was given, nature ran its course. And you cannot rely on a miracle that even the camels of a very righteous person would necessarily be miraculously transformed into a kashrus, obedient animal. But in times of Pinchas ben Yair, the Torah was already given. He knew Kol HaTorah Kula, and therefore not only his household, but even his animals would have been Zahir B'Kashrus. Let's take another example. Sefer Yehoshua, Perek Aleph. So the Jews come to the Yarden. On what day of the month? When did the Jews come to the Yarden? On the 10th day of Nisan. That's why the Achronim ask, we have Shabbos Hagadol. What miracle do we celebrate on Shabbos Hagadol? The miracle that the Jews put aside the god of the Egyptians and they tied it to their bedposts, and the teeth of the Egyptians they were all upset at us and they didn't do anything. Miracle of miracles, they didn't harm us. And when do we commemorate this miracle? Shabbos Hagadol. What? Since when do we ever commemorate a miracle on a day of the week? Every Jewish holiday is a day of the month, a calendar date. Since when do we commemorate miracles on the day of the week? So the Noisei Kelim on Shulchan Aruch say that we would have liked to celebrate the miracle on Yud Nisan. However, since there was another miracle that would soon take place on Yud Nisan, which is namely the splitting of the Yarden in times of Yoshua, people would mistakenly think that Yud Nisan is a celebration of the splitting of the Yarden, not remembering a celebration of the miracle of Shabbos HaGadol, and therefore, instead, it was decided that we pick the day of the week instead of the day of the month. Let's talk about the splitting of the Yarden. So Yeshua tells the Kohanim, dip your feet into the Yarden, bam! And all of a sudden the Yarden split. Did Nachshon ben Aminadab jump in? No. Did they need the coffin of Yosef? No. Did they need 600,000 Jews crying out to Hashem? No. Did they need the staff of Moshe Rabbeinu? No. So how is it possible that the splitting of the Yarden was easier for Yehoshua ben Nun than it was for Moshe Rabbeinu? Says Rabbi Cheskel Abramsky in his comments on the Tosefta of Masechta Soita, it's the same answer. Moshe Rabbeinu was before the Torah was given. Before the Torah was given, if you don't have keys to the room and you don't know how the system operates, it's very hard to override the system. Once you're given a key to the room, it's easy to open up. That's like asking a question. I don't understand. You have this big burly guy, he can't break into the room, and this little guy got in. Yeah, because the little guy had the keys, and the big guy, he doesn't have the keys, so he had to use a hammer. If you have to use a hammer, it's a lot harder to get into the room than if you have the keys or you have the code. Yoshua ben Nun had the code, so he punched in the code and the river split. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have the code. He needed to override the system. That's a much more difficult practice. So this is the basic idea. The basic idea is before the Torah was given, miracles were much harder to come by. Look in the Chumash. How many miracles do we see that any Basar V'Adam was involved in Sefer Bereshis? Did Avraham Avinu perform any miracles? None that come to the top of my head. I guess he was thrown into the fire and he wasn't burned. It's not even mentioned in the Chumash. Okay, that's a pretty big miracle. You know, Avraham Avinu didn't have children for many years. Why didn't he just, make a miracle and have a child? What miracles happened to Yitzchak Avinu? Yaakov Avinu? You don't really read about too many miracles in Sefer Bereshis. Yeah, that's pretty cool, right? It's not mentioned in the Chumash. Yeah, that seems to be certainly would admit it's a miracle. The what? The stones. Stones. Yeah, good. The Yarden split for Yaakov. Yeah, kibamakli avarti Yarden. Okay, these are all miracles that are not mentioned explicitly, but they certainly happened. But after the Torah was given, it almost seems, read through the Nevi'im, miracles become more possible. How many people in Sefer Bereshis brought people back to life? How many instances of Tchias HaMesim occurred in Sefer Bereshis? 0. How about a Nevi'im? They happened a couple of times. Eliyahu, Elisha. There are things happening after the Torah was given that don't seem to happen before the Torah was given. So that's step number 1. If you just came here today to make this observation, to learn this observation, that miracles became easier after the giving of the Torah, dayenu, it was worthwhile. But here is where the heavens open up. Now I'm not an expert in the works of the Leshem. To me, most of what the Leshem says is beyond my grasp. There happens to be in the Sefer HaLeshem, and we'll explain who this is, Rav Shlomo Elyashiv, who lived from 1841 to 1928. In the introduction to the Leshem, Rabbi Aryeh Levine, who is a Talmud of Rav Shlomo Elyashiv, writes that the Leshem Kemat was not able to write. He wasn't able to move his hand. His hand was somewhat paralyzed, except miraculously when he needed to write his Sfarim. When he was writing his Sfarim, somehow his hand moved like lightning. This is what Rabbi Aryeh Levine testifies in the introduction to the Leshem. Chafetz Chaim in his house had one picture of a Gadol B'Yisrael. He had the picture of the Leshem. Chafetz Chaim would say, get near this man in this world, because in the next world, you ain't getting anywhere near him. So the Leshem had a daughter who didn't have children for 17 years. And she was very heartbroken, and she was very tormented, and she would cry very much. And on one occasion, she went out into the field to cry. She didn't want to disturb her father. And her father hears his daughter whimpering, says, Mamala, why are you crying? She said, so why are you crying in the field? I didn't want to disturb you. So he gave her a bracha. In 2 years, you'll have a child who will illuminate the world. And her child was the Paisei Kadar, Rav Yosef Shalom El Yashiv, Zecher Tzaddik Levracha, who was not, at least to the open world, was not a promoter of learning Kabbalah, but supposedly Rabbi Yashiv actually recorded much of the writings of the Leshem. And it's interesting. Until the time of the Leshem, most understood that the primary way to understand the Arizal was the system of the Rashas of Shalom Sharabi. The Leshem sort of brought to the world that there are other interpretations of the Arizal. He had the Vilna Gaon's understanding of the Kabbalah of the Arizal. And at least in the Sefer, there seems to be like 4 pages that he writes, Al Pi Nigla, to explain this topic that we're discussing today. The Leshem makes an incredible observation. The later generations, are they of a lesser stature than the earlier generations? Are they the same? Are they better? What is the general tradition in the Jewish people? As we move further from Sinai, are we descending in our level? Are we status quo? In general, we say there's something called Yeridas Hadoros. So I once heard from Avigdor Miller. Avigdor Miller said, it's not muchach. There's no makar that it has to be that as the generations progress, we become lower. Lav dafka, it doesn't have to be, and it's not necessarily the case. But we do have 5 Gemaras and Shas that seem to say that as generations progress, we get lower and lower. Number 1, says the Leshem, the Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Yud Beis, Im Rishayim b'nei Malachim, Anu b'nei Adam, Im Rishayim b'nei Adam, Anu kechamoyrim. So the Gemara seems to say that the earlier sages were on a much higher level than we are. The Gemara in Eruvin says on Daf Nun Gimel, Liban shel Rishayim kepischei shel Ulam, v'shel Achroinim kepischei shel Heichal. The earlier generations, their heart was open like the Ulam. The Ulam was wide open. Our hearts are closed. Our hearts, says the Gemara, kinekev machad, is like a needle hole. The Gemara says in Yuma, Tesamid Beis, Toiva tziparnan shel Rishayim mikreisan shel Achroinim. Better are the fingernails of the earlier generations than the stomach of the later generations. So I once heard Rav Miller explain, the fingernails are the most expendable part of the body. You cut them off. You don't really need them. The stomach houses the vital organs. Better are the fingernails of the earlier generation than, meaning better are the lower people of the earlier generation than the greatest people in our generation. Even more than that, let's compare Bayis Rishon to Bayis Sheni. Bayis Rishon, there was the Eish from Shamayim, there were the Urim, the Tumim, there was the Arayin, there was Shechina, there was Ruach HaKodesh. There was no Shechina present in the second Beis HaMikdash. There was no Nevuah in the second Beis HaMikdash. From the time of Alexander the Great, prophecy ceased. We would expect then that all of these miracles that we observed must have stopped when the second Beis HaMikdash was built. Meaning if Yeshua split the Yarden and Eliyahu brought people back to life and Elisha brought people back to life, that was only in the early days, before Bayis Rishon, during Bayis Rishon. But if there's no prophecy and there's no Ruach HaKodesh and we have no fire Minah Shamayim and our stomachs are lower than their fingernails and we're a bunch of donkeys and not even Rav Chanina ben Doisa and Pinchas ben Yair, if we're a bunch of Chamoirim, what could we do already from the time of Bayis Sheni? And comes the Leshem and he makes an incredible, and this is such a strong argument. He says, but let's observe the pages of Talmud. Let's observe the pages of the Gemara. Talk about any miracle you want that ever occurred, and you'll see that from the time of the Bayis Sheni and on, it was so much easier to occur, and so much more prevalent, and so much more frequent than in the early times. Okay, let's talk about the water. We just explained. Yoshua ben Nun, to split the Yarden, he still needed the Arayin, he still needed the Kaihanim, and Reb Pinchas ben Yair, he's splitting the Yarden with his fingers. Nothing, he just talks to the Yarden. Split! Yeshua ben Nun couldn't do that. Yeshua ben Nun couldn't have a conversation with the guy and say, look, hey pal, look, you're one river. We're 600,000 Jews. Do us a favor. We got to get through. More than that, Yeshua ben Nun could only do it for the entirety of the Jewish people, and Pinchas ben Yair did it for himself because he had a personal mitzvah he needed to do. And he did it for the Arab cab driver behind him. Let's talk about fire. So Avram Avinu was saved from Or Kasdim. Who else in Tanakh was saved from fire? Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. You know, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin that what happened to Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah after they were thrown into the fire? Does anybody know? They had to run away. It was such an ayin hara on them. Everybody was eyeing them. Everyone was jealous of them. They commanded the focus and attention of the world. They had to flee. They had to run away. It was such a big miracle. And the Gemara in Ksubis on Daf Samach Zayin Amud Beis says, Mar Ukva and his wife, they gave charity to a poor man, and the poor man got wind that it was from Mar Ukva, so Mar Ukva and his wife hid in an oven. Hid in an oven, and where did they go? Did they have to run away because of Ayin Hara? Because the news is going to get out that Mar Ukva and his wife, they hid in an oven? It might have been a self-cleaning oven that they break every time you self-clean them. Every year. That's why they're self-cleaning, because you have to get a new oven every year. They get so hot. There's no such thing as a self-cleaning oven. It's called a self-destruct oven. You press a button, it breaks, and then you get a new oven. Then the Gemara Bava Metzia says on Pehei, Reb Zera went into a fire every 30 days to see whether Gehenna would be effective on him. The man's going into fire every 30 days. Hanani, Mishael, Azariah only did it once in their entire life. And don't tell, they're all after the Torah was given. Let's talk about lions. So my name is Daniel. I love the story, Daniel and the lions, the best story. That's one instance in Tanakh. Daniel didn't go into the lion's den. He had no choice. He was put in the lion's den. Reb Chanina ben Doisa, when he would see dangerous serpents, he would put his foot on it. As if, it's like, I don't know, he's stepping on an ant. He placed himself in sakana. What was a big deal for the Navi Daniel, Reb Chanina ben Doisa did every Chol HaMoed. Let's talk about Tchias HaMesim. How many instances of Tchias HaMesim are there in Tanakh? All you have is two people who did it, Eliyahu and Elisha. And it was very difficult for them to do. The pasuk says he put his eye on his eye and his mouth on his mouth, and he locked the door and he made sure nobody was looking, and he turned off the cameras. Even Obama couldn't watch him when he was doing it. And there are only two people who did in the whole Tanakh. Abraham never did it, Moshe never did it, Yeshaya never did it, Yecheskel never did it. No, nobody did it. Only Eliyahu and Elisha. But what are you talking about? Rabbi Yochanan thought Rav Kahana was laughing at him. So what did Rabbi Yochanan do? Rabbi Yochanan looked at Rav Kahana, and Rav Kahana died. And Rabbi Yochanan said, oops! So he just brought him back to life. He didn't close the door. He didn't have to do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He didn't even turn off the cameras. He just brought him back to life. Rabba shechted Reb Zera on Purim. Oops! All right, just get up. Rav Chananya ben Chachinai learned a little bit too long. Gemara in Ksubas Samach Beis, he learned for 12 years. He said, honey, I'll be back soon. And when he came back, she was dead in the house. He said, oh, sorry, I got a little caught up. So he just brought her back to life. I don't understand. When Avraham came, Lisboid L'Sara V'Livkaisa, cancel the check to the Chevra Kadisha and just knock her up again. Bring her back to life. No, he didn't do that. How about this? The Gemara says that Antoninus said to Rebbe, Zutar b'de'isbechu mechaye mesim. Even the smallest Tana is able to revive the dead and resuscitate the dead. Well, wait a second. Yeshaya never resuscitated the dead. Yecheskel never did it. Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. All the Nevi'im, only Eliyahu and Elisha. And Rebbe here is from Antoninus. Word got out on the streets of Rome. that every last Tana, and there are those who say every Amoira had the Kayach of Tchias HaMesim. If your name is in Shas, you could be Mechaye Mesim. That's why sometimes it will say Hahu Gavra. Why doesn't it say the guy's name? Because it says his name. It could be Mechaye Mesim, so it doesn't want to say his name. Let's talk about the rain. So Eliyahu says, God, let's make a famine. Okay, Hashem says, you got a deal. Then somebody died. Eliyahu said, you know what, I need to bring him back to life. So Hashem said, you want to have two keys? You want to have the key of rain and Tchias HaMesim? So we have to swap. I have to make it rain again. Eliyahu said, are you kidding me? I thought I have some power over here. No, God says, one key at a time. And Meir in the Gemara in Tainis Daf Ches says, if not for the fact that the world needs rain, I would abolish rain permanently. I would just remove rain from the system. I would make it that there's no such thing as rain. Meir could do what Eliyahu can't do? I'll tell you a story. Tainis Chav Gimel Amud Beis. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elyashiv. So a guy comes to Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elyashiv and he says, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elyashiv, I can't take my brothers-in-law. They're so rich and powerful. They're constantly bugging me. They're pressuring me. Wherever I go Pesach, it's not good enough. We have to go to a better place. I can't handle the pressure. So Yitzchak ben Elyashiv, what's their name? Yeah. They should become poor, and they became poor. The next day he goes back to the Rebbe. Now that they became poor, they're collecting money from me. Okay, fine, they should become rich again. Then the Talmud comes back to Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elyashiv and says, my wife, we got married 17 years ago, 30 years ago. My wife was gorgeous. But today, she doesn't look the same. So Yitzchak ben Elyashiv, what's her name? Chana. Chana Tisyapi. Chana should be beautiful again, no problem. Well, you should have come to me earlier. And now she's gorgeous again. And the next day, he comes like, Rebbe, but now she took my credit card and she's shopping all day. I can't take it. Let her become plain again. And she looked plain again. By the way, you see from here, don't wish for something you don't have. I wish I had more money. I wish this, I wish that. There's a reason why not. If it would be the other way, it would have been worse off. I mean, the man is just changing people's looks and financial status like that. He doesn't close the door. He doesn't turn off the cameras. He's just changing nature. These are all examples that the Leshem gives. If we can, maybe we'll add one last example. There's a Gemara in Ksubis. Daf Samach Beis Amud Beis. Rebbe's son went to learn in the yeshiva. He learned a little too long. By the time he came back, his wife wasn't able to have children anymore. So he davened, and she had a child. Piece of cake. I don't understand. What Rebbe's son could do, Avraham Avinu? I mean, why couldn't Avraham do whatever Rebbe's son got going? Why can't Avraham Avinu do that with Sarah? How is it possible that the son of Rebbe had more control over the world than Avraham Avinu? And the Leshem offers the following really revolutionary approach. Based on the idea that we started off the shiur with, that the control and the keys and the mastery of the universe is given over with the Torah. The Torah is the blueprint of nature. But if I were to ask you, what is the primary aspect of Torah? What is the primary part of Torah? What part of Torah is more important? Amar Rabbi Yochanan like Karas Hakadosh Baruch Hu Bris Im Yisrael Ella Torah Shabbat Peh. It's the oral law. The expansion, the explosion, the elevation, proliferation of Torah Shabbat Peh, for whatever reason that the Leshem says is beyond our understanding, because only God knows the correct time that He wants things to happen, the expansion of Torah Shabbat Peh did not happen until the times of the second Beis HaMikdash. There certainly was Torah Shabbat Peh Misinai. All the principles and all the mitzvahs were given. However, the Yud Gimel Midoy Shehatar Nidreshes Behem, the ideas of the Amoraim, the arguments, the Kal V'chomers and the Gzeir Shavas, the way they were spread to the world, it did not happen until Bayesheni and further. Many of the Gzeres Chachamim were not in effect yet until Bayesheni. For instance, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi writes in the Yaros Tavash, Ezra went to Bavel, and you know what's going on in Bavel when Ezra was in Bavel? There was rampant intermarriage. The Jews were so unlearned, they didn't even have sukkahs, basically. There was mass assimilation. How's that possible? So Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi says, very simple. There was Torah, there were no Gezeros Chachamim. So you could eat with a guy without any restrictions of Pas Akum, Yistam Yenam, Shemen Akum. All the Gezeros of Chachamim did not come into effect until the time of Ezra and on. Therefore, all the safeguards did not prevent the Jewish people from basically almost disappearing. It was from the time of Purim and on, when the Jewish people accepted the oral law of Ba'ava. That is when the heavens were open, says the Baal HaShem, where God opened up the Shamayim and He gave the secrets of the Torah Sheba'al Peh to the Tanoim and Amoraim. And along with the Torah Sheba'al Peh comes the keys and the controls of the universe. It's not that the Tanoim and Amoraim were greater than the Nevi'im. They were not. They were on a lower madrega, no question. They were not as great, not as Moshe, not as Yishai, not as Yechezkel, and not as the lowest of the Nevi'im. However, Kach Gazar Habori Yisbarach, that for the continuity of the Jewish people, that should be the particular time in history where the heavens opened up and God gave over the expansion and explosion of Torah Sheba'al Peh to the Jewish people. And along with that came the keys of the universe. And therefore what Eliyahu couldn't do, and what Elisha couldn't do, the lowest of the Tanoim could do. And therefore what Yoshua ben Nun couldn't do, Reb Pinchas ben Yair was able to do. And what Avraham couldn't do, Rebbe's son was able to do. So there are really three periods in Jewish history. There's before the Torah was given, where miracles were extremely difficult. Almost impossible, because you needed to override the system completely. Then there's post-Matan Torah, the times of Moshe, times of Yeshua, Eliyahu, Elisha, the times of the Nevi'im, where the Torah was given, but not fully. There was still some dimension of Torah that was not yet open to the world. And therefore the control of the universe was somewhat limited. Comes the building of the Bayesheni, says the Lashem. This is the meaning of Gadol Yeh Kavod Bayis Ha'achroin Min Harishain. The Navi Chagai says the glory of the second temple will be greater than the first temple. In what way? There is no Shechina, there's no Ruach HaKodesh, there's no Aroin, Eish, Urim V'Tumim. How was the glory more? It allowed for an expansion of Torah that along with it came the full control over the universe. What could not be done in earlier generations, because Shema Yenakem is a Chuyosav, the Gemara says. The Baal HaShem actually deals with this. So why do we find that sometimes Tanoim and Amram were afraid to perform a miracle? He says that's in the public eye, so they were hesitant to utilize their ability. But what couldn't be done earlier was now in everyday, like water, like nothing. So two ha'aras that the Baal HaShem adds. He says, we find that the Rambam paskins in two places, in Hilchos Trumos and Hilchos Beis HaBechira, Kidsha Rishayna, Kidsha L'Shaita, V'loi, Kidsha L'Asalavai, Kidsha Shniya, Kidsha L'Shaita, V'Kidsha L'Asalavai. Meaning, the Kedusha that Yoshua ben Nun injected into the land of Israel was for that time and not for all time. And Ezra's Kedusha was eternal. Ezra sanctified Eretz Yisrael eternally. So wait a second. Who was greater? Yehoshua ben Nun or Ezra? You got to think that Yehoshua ben Nun was greater than Ezra. Yeshua is the Talmud of Moshe. Yeshua even had some of inkling of the 50th Madrega. Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshua ben Nun, the Chassam Sofer writes, he was misboinen in the Shar Nun. So why couldn't he sanctify Eretz Yisrael eternally and only Ezra was able to? Says the lesson, because Ezra had the good fortune of living in the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, when the mastery of Torah Sheba'al Peh was given over to the world. It was a time when Torah Sheba'al Peh exploded, And along with it came certain abilities that no one ever had before. And therefore, says the Baal HaLeshem, in the times of the Second Temple, the Anshe Knesset had the audacity to do something that nobody ever had the chutzpah to do before. They dive into the Rebbeinu Shalom, be mevatel, the desire for Avodah Zarah. Wow, what a great idea. Why didn't anybody think of that before? Why didn't Yeshaya say, hey, what's going on over here? There's Avodah Zarah everywhere. God, just stop the whole thing. Make it ridiculous. In America, every year there's a new gimmick for kids. All the kids bring in a certain toy, for kugelach, jacks, fidget spinners. Every year there's a new Yetzer Hara. And then all of a sudden it dies. It's like the Anshe Knesset gathers together and they're mispalo, Rebbeinu make it that it's such a ridiculous thing, nobody's ever going to buy it again. And somehow they go off the shelves, right? Where this meeting takes place, I can't reveal right now. So why couldn't anybody get into their minds before, let's get rid of Avodah Zarah? Says Hashem, nobody ever had the chutzpah to come to the creator of the universe and say, we would like to change the way the world works. We would like to remove from people's personalities and psychology that they don't want Avodah Zarah anymore. Says Hashem, comes the second base HaMikdash. And they see God has given them the keys, the reins of the universe. They could bring the dead back to life. They could split the sea. They could go on fire. They could step on snakes. So, while we're at it already, why don't we just, change everything? Rebbeinu get rid of Avodah Zarah. And they did. The Leshem uses such an interesting language. He says, Eich herhivu nafsham. How they have the audacity, the gall, to go before God and request to abolish Avodah Zarah. He said once they saw that the full control of the universe was given to them, they said, while we're at it, let's just get rid of the whole thing entirely. I don't like stories. They're not true. They never happen. But I'll tell you them anyway. But these did happen. As far as I know, the Nefesh HaChaim doesn't bring down any stories in his Svarim. Not in Nefesh HaChaim, not in Ruach Chaim. There's one Maisa he brings down. He brings down a story about the Taz. The story goes, the Taz, during one of the pogroms, he was Mechaber, one of the Kinnos. He was crying out during one of the pogroms as a Sheikh Tzibur, and he fainted. And the Rebbeinu came to him in a dream, and he said, I'm going to protect this city. The following pasuk came to him, V'ganoisi al ir ba'avur David Avdi. Rabbeinu David, the Taz. Nefesh HaChaim writes in the Ruach Chaim that a woman came to the Taz, and she says, B'ni, my son is dying. The Taz says, what do you want from my life? Hasachas alekim anoichi. The woman said, I don't want anything from you, but you're learning Torah now. I want the zechus of your Torah to bring my kid back to life. So the Taz says, fine, no problem. You're right. I give you the zechus of my Torah, says the Nefesh HaChaim. The kid's fever broke and he came back to life. I'm not telling you, this is not a Maisa. This is written by Rav Chaim Volozhin about Adoinenu David, the Taz. That's the power of Torah. The Torah has latent in it the complete control over the world. Now, it doesn't mean me and you could access it. It doesn't mean we're able to tap into it the way the Taz was able to tap into it. But it's there. It's in the Torah. The Torah, in the Torah, it used to be Umoisha Allah Elohim, and now it's V'shachanti B'soicham. When you open up a Gemara, when you open up a Chumash, when you open up genuine, authentic Torah, we may not be on the level to extract and activate that power, but realize that what you're involved in is something so divine, so powerful, it has atomic power in it. I'll end off with a controversial story. Some people like it, some people don't like it. You'll think about it, you'll ask other people about it, you'll make phone calls, do whatever you want. This story is written in the Sefer Oyal Moshe. I actually verified it. There are people in Eretz Yisrael today that have a Messiah not to marry into this family because of this story. So I don't know, it is true, it isn't true, I can't tell you the story is true, but it is true that there are families in Eretz Yisrael that won't marry, and then you'll be surprised which family, the most meyuchastic of family in Klal Yisrael. Here's the story. It starts with the Ramchal, and it ends with hearsay. Hearsay is hearsay. The Ramchal writes in 1648, 1649, so Rav Shamshon Meir Shapoli, one of the great old-time Mekubalim, he was trying to figure out, what's going on? Why is this happening? So he did something called Sheilas Chaloim, don't try it at home. And he took the Sitra Achra, and he was mashbiah the Sitra Achra. Definitely don't try that at home. He said, why is this happening? And the Sitra Achra said, let's make a deal. You're mevatel Shabbos, Mila, and Chodesh, Shabbos, Mila, and Torah, and I'll stop the pogroms. And Rav Shamshon Shapoli said, not a chance. We will never stop learning Torah. Says Ramchal, from here we see Torah is the antidote, the kryptonite of the Yetzer Hara, the Sitra Achra. Fine. That's the end of the story reported in the Ramchal. Supposedly, legend has it that there's a sequel to the story. Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer said the following. What happened next was, they told Rav Shamshon Shapoli Minas Shamayim that if he wants to stop the pogroms of 1648, 1649, he would have to be Moiser Nefesh al Kiddush Hashem, together with the other Gadol Hador at the time, who was the Shach. Shach, the greatest work on Yeridea, together with the Taz. So he comes to the Shach, he says, great idea, I have a proposal. Both of us will be Moiser Nefesh al Kiddush Hashem, and then the Jewish people will be saved. He said, good idea. The problem is, I have 3 months left to write the Shach on Yeridea. Give me 3 months. 3 months, you know how many? Is it worth it? We got to take care of this, got to nip it in the bud. Shach said, I can't do it right now, 3 months. V'kachava. Shach finished his parish on Yeridea, and then together with Rav Shamshon Shapoli, they were Moiser Nefesh al Kiddush Hashem. So you'll ask, historically, no, they did not die at the same time. That's true. But that's the way the story goes. And there are Gedolim today that vouch for this story. And the question is, why did the Shach prolong the Gzeros of 1648, 1649? Shouldn't he have taken it on the chin for the Jewish people? Says Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer, if you would understand what a line of the Shach on Yeridea means for Klal Yisrael, what type of life-saving powers it offers the Jewish people for then and for all time, if you would recognize how every word of the Shach is latent and jam-packed with bracha, Yeshuas, and chayim for the eternity of the Jewish people, then you would understand why the Shach felt he couldn't let go until the commentary of the Shach was finished. There are people in Eretz Yisrael today who have a Mesorah not to marry into the family of the Shach because they're not happy that the Shach did this. You? No.
Yeah?
Yeah,
I married him.
Oh, you married him. This is a story. A story is just a story. I don't like to tell a story.
Here I got divorced the next
What the Baal Hashem is revealing to us is that Kay Amar Boiracha Yaakov, what a Jew has been given on Har Sinai, and even later than that, through the second Beis HaMikdash. And is it possible to say, you read stories about the supernatural miracles that were taking place in Sfas in the times of that Rizal, the Ramak, Reb Chaim Vital. It's almost like they had something going that even in the times of the Talmud, they didn't have going. The miracles you read about Sfas, and maybe, just maybe, there was a period in history where God opened up the secrets of Kabbalah to the world during the times of that Rizal, and along with that as well came maybe another dimension of control of the universe. That's what perhaps one could suggest based on the writing of the Leshem. But be it as it may, I think what we could learn from here is historically understand there are 3 basic periods in Jewish history. Before the Torah was given, after the Torah was given before Bayesheni, and the specific period of Bayesheni from the times of Ezra until the Chasimas HaTalmud. But understand and appreciate that when a person has the opportunity to tap into the Torah, he is literally elevated to a completely different dimension, a different world. You are dealing with nuclear supernatural power. We may not be on the level to perform miracles or salvations, but realize, as the Nefesh HaChaim says, every word of Torah that you say, the Rebbeinu Shalom comes down and is saying that word with you. These are the architectural plans of the universe. Whatever takes place in this world, we're the ones controlling the world. We're the ones directing the world. The Rebbeinu Shalom is only riding the horse. He goes where we take him. May we be zoicha to take the Rebbeinu Shalom to the Achris Hayamim. May we be zoicha to see the greatest miracles of all time. With the Achris Hayamim v'Yaskal Tzedek and Meher Yameinu. Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.